Hi everyone. Today I will be discussing about Frederick Douglass's speech on the title What to the Slave is the 4th of July, and just explaining how it fits into the larger picture of American literature and the development of American identity during the 19th centuries. And for me, throughout this semester, we really talked about how American literature helped create a national mythology, just about like what United States represents. And I feel like many like American writers presented the country as like a very unique nation founded on like freedom, democracy, independence, and also opportunities as well. And unlike Europe, which American also associated with like monarchy, class systems, and inherited power, the United States liked to describe itself as like a country where like ordinary individuals can create their own destiny. And as a result, a lot of American literature really focuses on the idea like self-reliances, individualism, and just freedom as well, where often writers often describes the American character as like a very independent, ambitious, hardworking, and rebellious against like oppression as well. And we like especially sees that in like writers like I believe his name is Ralph Waldo Emerson, if I'm not wrong, which his essay in like I believe it's called Self-Reliances really argues the individuals that should trust themselves rather than just blindly following society, where we also see it as like an idea surrounding Westworld expansion in the frontiers as well, where Americans imagine themselves as brave like pioneers building civilization and just like progress as well. However, I feel like one major theme that we like explore during this like semester is just like seeing these like national myths often being ignored or like downplayed many of these dark realities of like Americans' history as well. And while these Americans celebrate like liberty and equality, slavery continues to still exist. And I feel like Native Americans were like displaced as well during like violence and expansions, and just seeing like women's and like monarchies were excluded from like political and social power as well. So even though American literature often promotes an ideal image of the nation, many writers also still challenges that image by exposing its conflicts as well. So this is exactly what Frederick Douglass's speech is about, where my main argument is just saying that Douglass's challenge is to have a dominant like mythology of like American freedom by just exposing the tense of like a nation that just celebrates like liberty while just still continuing to enslave millions of people. And at the same time, I feel like Douglass still believes in the ideal where America still claims to stand for, which makes the speech not only a school but like also of a nation that also can demand that is like finally living up to its principles as well. And I feel like one of the like most important moments in the speech is when like Douglas really like separates himself from the audience during like the 4th of July celebration, just saying like I believe there was a part where he was saying like this 4th of July is yours and not mine. I believe that was what he was saying in one of his speech, if I'm not wrong. But like I feel like during that speech as well just immediately creates distance between the white Americans celebrating the independence and Black Americans who are like denying freedom. And I feel like it forces the audience to just confront the fact that the holiday does not represent the same thing for everyone. And for white Americans, the 4th of July symbolizes like patriotism, democracy, and liberty, and it just celebrates the like national victory over British like oppression and just like the founding of like supposedly free society as well. But I feel like Douglas argues that for the enslaved people, and the holiday is actually like a painful reminder of exclusion and injustice, and while white Americans celebrate freedom, and enslaving people continuing to suffer violence, forced labor, and the denial of basic human rights as well. So I feel like Douglas really like even argues that the celebration becomes very offensive when viewed from like perspective of enslaved people. And I feel like he also suggests it being like hypocritical for Americans to praise liberty while actively denying it to others. And like throughout the speech, I feel like he repeatedly points out the problems between American ideals and its actions. And in other words, the nation just claims to just stand for universal freedom, and in its practice, that freedom only applies to certain groups. But I also think that Douglas, especially powerful, what he like does not completely rejects the ideal of American itself, but in fact, like early in the speech that he really praised that fathers, excuse me, and like acknowledging the encourage of like American Revolution as well. And I feel like he like respects the principles behind the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution as well. And but he argues the modern like American that has portrayed those like ideals through slavery. And I feel like this is important as well, because Douglas is not attacking freedom or democracy themselves, but instead he is arguing about like slavery is fundamentally like companionable with like American values, I would say. And just I feel like this just takes the language Americans use to just like describes themselves within like liberty, equality, justice, Christianity, and democracy as well. And I feel like it just turns out to the nation against the nation. And I feel like he forces the Americans to just like confront the gaps between who they claim to be and who they actually do as well, and what they actually do as well. And I feel like that like strategy just makes the like speech even more effectively, like, because I feel like Douglas just sounds deeply American himself, but rather than he rejecting the country completely, he claims ownership over its ideals. And he like argues that like Black Americans deserve access to those like promises too. And in ways I feel like Douglas is fighting to expand the definition of who counts as fully American. And the historical like context of the speech as well is just extremely important, I would say. And just seeing that Douglas is delivering the speech in 1852, just during a period of growing national attention over slavery as well. At this point, I feel like the United States has become increasingly divided between North and South, and like debates over like abolition and just slavery within the Western territories and states' rights were increasing as well. I feel like because of this contact, I feel like Douglas's speech really reflects on a nation approaching crisis. And I feel like the conflicts between freedom and slavery were becoming impossibly to ignored, and just seeing that Americans wanted to celebrate themselves and as like a world leading democracy. But slavery exposed the limits of that democracy as well, whereas Douglas' speech captures this tension between it perfectly, because it also reveals how unstable the national mythology has become. And I feel like his speech also connects to several other authors that we like talked about this semester. For example, like Emerson's Self-Reliances, like I said, where he celebrates like individually and personally freedoms, but Douglas forced readers to like ask important questions of like, for example, who actually has access to that freedom, you know? And Emerson often speaks about like liberty in like abstract terms, while Douglas is more focused on like world social and political imbalances that just prevents freedoms from being universal as well. And I feel like we also should connect it to like Douglas to like Henry David thorough as well. I feel like from his like reliances to civil government, I feel like I think that's what his story is about. But I feel like Thoreau really argues that people have moral responsibilities to reset unjust laws rather than blindly obeying the government, where Douglas shares a similar perspective because he argues that slavery is morally wrong regardless of what the law says. Both writers challenges the ideas that just automatically equals justice. But another important comparison is just like William Press, where from his story or what he said about like American looking glass for a white man, where like Douglas, Press also critiques American societies from perspective from like a group where excluding from the dominant like national identity, and where both writers also like expose the pretense of a country that claims a value equality while practicing racial oppression as well. And this works complicates the like ideals like image of American promotes by mainstream culture as well. But I think for me, within like his speech, I believe it's called, what is it called? What to the Slave is the 4th of July. I feel like it just like significantly, because it's transformed into like American literature as well, into a form that have moral criticism. But instead of just simply like celebrating the like nation, I feel like Douglas also demands the accountability, and just where he forces the Americans to confront the people exclude from their vision of freedom and democracy as well. So in the larger picture of American literature, I feel like Douglas's speech complicates the national mythology of the United States, where it just reminds the readers that American identity has always been shaped by conflict, and the story of American is not only about liberty and progress, but it's also about exclusion, and just seeing all the struggles, who deserves the freedom as well. But at the same time, I feel like Douglas's speech is not purely hopeless, but I think he does still believe that the country can improve, and by holding America accountable in its own ideals, he suggests that change is possible. And I feel like that balance between criticism and hope is a part of what makes the speech more like also more powerful and so important within American literature as well. So I feel like for me, choosing like Frank Douglas's speech of like I believe is What to the Slave is the 4th of July, both challenges and reshapes the American narrator and expose the pretense behind the nation's self-image, and also just like demanding a broader and more inclusive definition of freedom. So through the speech, I feel like Douglas becomes a part of a larger tradition of American writers that we've been looking forward to, and just who uses literature not only just to celebrate the country, but to question it and just pushing it more towards change. And that is my final project video, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you.